Yeah, and I was asking you, Ken, before you got kicked off. So is that Gavin Newsom's wife next to him? Because I don't obviously I don't. She's not. It's not Jill Biden, or I don't think any of Biden's daughters. But is that Newsom's wife now? The blonde next to him? Do you know?
Well, I'm still warming up here, so I don't see this shared screen yet.
Oh,
But I wouldn't know her wife if she sat in my lap. I mean, I wouldn't know his wife if she sat in my lap. I'm sorry.
okay. All right. All right. Just I was curious. Yeah.
I would
All
hope
right.
it's his
Well,
wife, though. I mean, I don't think he's
well, it
ready
could
to.
be. I know. I think maybe it's one of Biden's daughters because they're of that age too. Because the guy is, it's Biden, and maybe Jill Biden was doing something else, so they brought one of the daughters. I know he has one or two daughters in addition to Hunter. So yeah,
Oh, now I see. Now I see. The
yeah,
blonde, huh?
yeah. Is
I
that
think
Newsom's
he's.
wife now?
That he. I don't see Gavin Newsom's right arm, so I assume it's around the lady.
Beside him.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's that must be his wife.
Okay. All right. Well, here let's continue with the clip.
Folks, send a message to the nation. Courage matters. Leadership matters.
Larry Elder, the conservative talk radio host and replacement candidate who received the most votes of the 46 running, had indicated he wouldn't accept the results.
Whether or not you win or lose, will you accept the results of the election tomorrow?
I think we all ought to be looking at election integrity, no matter whether you're a Democrat, an independent, or a Republican.
Late Tuesday, he addressed voters.
We may have lost the battle, but we are going to win the war.
Caitlyn Jenner, the reality star, and another of the replacement candidates spoke out as well.
This state deserves better than Gavin Newsom. Unfortunately, it looks like they're not going to get that.
The campaign was set against the backdrop of multiple crises in the Golden State. Record wildfires, COVID, homelessness, and rising violent crime. But 1 year ahead of a scheduled gubernatorial election, Californians gave Newsom a vote of confidence.
This would be something to definitely, keep him on his toes, put a little interest in little areas that need more attention.
Jacob, I'm sure the analysts are already looking into this. What factors ultimately led to the recall effort failing?
At the end of the day, Savannah, California is still a 2-to-1 Democratic state. That's a number that's increased since the last recall election here, which resulted in Arnold Schwarzenegger becoming our governor in California. And on top of that, people are supportive of Governor Newsom's policies, particularly around COVID with masking and vaccine mandates. Savannah?
Jacob Soboroff at the State House after a late night there. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube.
So what are your thoughts, Ken, since you're a Californian? I presume you voted.
Yeah, I voted. He's not a remarkable. Oh, yeah, my volume, my mute is working. Okay, he's not a remarkable governor.
Yeah,
we don't have a remarkable governor or a remarkable mayor of Los Angeles or San Francisco. They're overboard, bending backwards for the homeless and the disadvantaged and the unemployed and so forth, and they're not handling things properly, I don't think. The major issues.
I can go up a little bit. I just gotta grab some water, so go on for a few years. I'll be right back.
Go ahead.
And, ask Dennis.
Yeah, I'll ask Dennis. So I never was invited to any governor's parties, so I don't know. And I don't even know much about the Democratic Party either. I mean, I have some friends in the Democratic Party, and but it's politics as usual. So that last announcer mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger, but he didn't mention the last governor we had, which was Jerry Brown. He was an excellent governor.
Yeah.
Tough on finance and compassionate on social issues. So perfect governor. I don't know why he didn't run for president. He's probably just as old.
Oh, he did in '92. Remember?
I know, but this time he didn't.
Right. Well, I think it was a bit old. Although, hey, Biden was a bit old too.
Yeah. So I don't know with Gavin, and they're kind of if you've ever been up with celebrities or super rich people, it is like a class by itself. You know, somebody else is driving your car, is a chauffeur, you have a jet plane, you live in a house with lots of bedrooms, and you know, it's all kinds of things. Every night is party night, and you got to make appearances in front of TV. You're a celebrity, you know other celebrities. It's hard to operate there. It's very hard. You become part of the elegante, you know, the elite, the elitist people. And I feel
Right.
that's more or less what I get with him. You know, he's the friendly superstar, that kind of a thing.
Right. But probably, well, not left enough for me. Well, anyway, as I was saying last night, I mean, he could get you guys single payer. He's got the
Oh,
votes in the legislature. It's just, the lobbyists won't. He works for them, not for the people of California.
yeah, I
Again,
think,
he's got nothing to, he signs, they pass it, which again would, wherever the Democrats would pass it, right?
yeah,
And
whatever he gets,
and
he
then
signs.
I think because of Obamacare, the Biden has to sign off. And if well, it would be maybe he would have vetoed it essentially as president, which of course would look really bad for him. So they probably don't want that,
Well,
and he
let's say,
probably would, no, just based on what Biden has said about single payer,
no,
which
no,
is,
hold it a minute, 1 second. Like, I'm not following these things exactly. Okay, he's been there 4 years. He's been through a drought. He's been through a firestorms, and it happened again. And the major cause of the firestorms is not global warming. The major cause of the firestorms is advanced development
right,
and
overdevelopment.
and
Yeah,
power lines. Power lines is the
yeah,
major thing. Power lines go through, rural areas or over mountaintops through the forest. And in a heavy storm or something, they
right,
fall over and cause fires. So
sure.
he didn't deal with that or put an emergency handling of clearance around structures and the drought. He didn't start to preserve the water or stop the usage. I don't
Oh,
think it was him. We had a movement in Los Angeles. Well, I'm sorry, I don't have a good memory. I'm not that political, but we had a movement in Los Angeles to get rid of all lawns, and the local Department
really?
of Water and Power would pay homeowners, I think it was $700 or something, to replant their lawns with succulents or
Mm,
low indigenous
right,
plants
right,
that don't
right.
use a lot of water. And I don't know if he did that, but there's things you can do about drought.
Sure.
There's
Oh, you can
close
stop
down
fracking.
close down the golf courses. Yeah, I don't know how much water fracking uses. Maybe that's a high.
It
Maybe
uses a
that's
lot. It uses a huge amount, actually,
there. You go.
compared.
Yeah. So
Plus, of course, there's the chance of contaminating your drinking water,
or another thing
which is
is,
why we're lucky. We're lucky. Cuomo got stopped from a few years ago from when he tried to bring fracking in, or to, well, there was too much pressure for him to not, you know, because everybody talks about how the city has the best, some of the
best
best
water in the
water in the
world.
world because of the aqua, well, the pipes that run upstate to like the Finger Lakes to bring it down here. So there was a big, and even upstate again, they didn't want it. So they're talking about putting pipelines from Pennsylvania across to, yeah, and then to do fracking up there too. So yeah, so that got blocked again, like around 2010 when Como
Now,
probably wanted to do it, but there was just so much resistance that he never even tried.
okay, also with the homelessness. Now it's a problem, and it's a
Sure.
very big problem in Los Angeles because it's very clement weather, and
Right.
there's lots of support for the homeless. I once went to buy a tent, and the guy said, "Oh, that's kind of like the cheapest tent. That's the one that people buy and hand out to the homeless." So, there's lots of nonprofits or general citizens walking around. For the most part, the homeless are not homeless. They're living in tents in, stabilized areas and supported by city services. So it's not, I'm not saying it's an easy solution, an easy problem to solve, but I don't think it gets solved with compassion and empathy. That's not the answer. The answer
Well,
is,
there's what they tried in Salt Lake City, right? Where
I
they
don't know.
actually paid to put people up, and it was cheaper. It was cheaper for them than, uh, not because, you wind up spending more on a home by taking a homeless person to jail. So, I mean, and it was a very successful program. Um, even give credit to the Mormons, they were compassionate enough to try. And of course, again, they stopped it after a certain point and not doing it anymore, but it was a very success. I mean,
when you
that's
call
definitely been shown to be a way you could do it. Yeah. Again, it's cheaper than just leaving them on the street because the cost to shelter them or if the police arrest them, you wind up spending much more per homeless person, basically.
Okay, that's fine. But
And, there's so many um, houses and hotels that are empty anyway that you can just use that.
yeah, okay, great,
But
great, okay.
again, I just say it's clearly recognized as a very successful program, even again by Republicans, because they just don't talk about it because they don't want to. It's too sensible is what it is. But yeah, but that'll be a possible. But
Well, how many homeless people are you sheltering in your house?
well, personally, no.
Okay.
But I definitely would be okay with the city putting them up in some of the
No,
some
your
of these
house,
empty
your house,
but
your
also some of those
house.
empty penthouses that people are holding as investments.
Well, do you have any of those? You can do it.
No, I just have my apartment. That's it.
Okay. So what about your car? You're not using the car, if you have a car. The thing is this, it's not
don't have. I'm a New Yorker can remember. A lot of us don't. So
okay.
a lot of us
So
rely on public transport.
I personally believe
Yeah.
that it's not in the area of compassion and empathy. It's in the area of rehabilitation and self-sufficiency. People
Sure. No,
have to.
Yeah, you want to get them a job. Sure.
No, I want them. They have to be, cured of whatever caused them to be down there. There's some people that take some temporary hard luck.
Right.
That's the Department of Welfare, or the medical condition, or their, whatever it is. But if it's just due to drugs or indolence, that has to be. They have to be rehabilitated. Otherwise, there's no end. You live in New York, right? You're in an apartment. You're not on the first floor, right?
No.
Okay, so you put some breadcrumbs on the window. What do you get? You put breadcrumbs outside on the windowsill. You get pigeons, right? And that's
Right.
what happens. That's what happens with the homeless. California, it's sunny all the time. There's girls riding around on roller skates. It's exotic. There's people handing out food in tents, and there's lots of recreational drugs.
Let's let Dennis. Never heard
let's go to
his
Dennis.
thoughts on the homeless.
And you have talk about the homeless in New York.
Well, again, we had before you came on the show, we were going, we had, we were talking about it, last year with Jim when we were doing the show then. We even had some homeless advocates on the show at one point. Dennis probably remembers that had interesting things to say about, the shelter. They were very disapproving of the shelter system and what the city government was doing to the homeless. I remember that video of that guy that the cops were arresting in the homeless guy they were arresting in the subway that over the not the ACLU. One of them, legal aid, was defending him that he had been brutalized by the cops. Essentially, was caught on video. But Dennis, what are your thoughts about the issue of homelessness in our society?
I would say the idea is to stabilize people's lives, and that should be the official goal: is to stabilize them. Some people will get to work, and some people will never get to work. And you have to stabilize their life within the framework of their situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I have a view of homelessness as a problem of the real estate industry under capitalism.
Right.
That's how I think of it. And it's their problem to solve, which they never will, because all they're doing is looking out for profits for themselves. And and as long as they're just looking out for profits for themselves, you can't find solutions.
Well, if they're not providing affordable housing, how are they going to house people? Yeah.
Right. The thing is that the real estate industry has to be taxed.
Yeah.
In New York, anyway, and just like Wall Street has to be taxed, and we have plenty of money. It's just that there are people gobbling it up and keeping it for themselves, and I don't really agree. I never agreed with that, ever.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that the richer just become richer and everybody else should become poorer is something that we should fight against, and we should organize ourselves effectively to fight against it.
Yes.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
I'm sure it's also an issue out in L.A., Ken, but I mean, we've had stuff with the real estate lobby, and it's always the case that the mayor winds up being beholden. I mean, every mayor, including de Blasio, has always been beholden.
Especially de Blasio, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, made a lot of promises, and then, of course, Mike can talk about because he was involved in it. What de Blasio said about not selling public libraries, and then what he did when he was in office, of course, to sell some of that. Yeah.
That's a big problem. They're going to sell off anything to the developers.
Yeah. What they sold off there is a big library near the Botanical Gardens that they had a huge fight over. Bloomberg, of course, ultimately. So, and it was, scandal, really. Well, yeah, let's go. Let's go on to the next clip, which is, well, I'm sure some of you, I don't know if you heard about this today, Ken, but this whole big, Republican temper tantrum about what General Miley did towards the end of Trump's presidency to kind of warn, to prevent, again, this kind of same thing that they did with Nixon before he resigned about, making sure he couldn't make any crazy orders to the military, but also warning, which I think actually they did with the Soviets and Nixon, warning them that don't worry, if he's crazy, we're not going to let him push the button. But this has resulted in a whole big, brouhaha in the Senate and Congress. Let me go back.
Stunning new revelations tonight about how concerned the nation's top military officer was about former President Donald Trump's behavior and actions around last year's election and the January insurrection. They come from a yet-to-be-released book by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa of the Washington Post. And they raise serious questions about the end of the Trump administration, the perception of the former president's fitness for the job, and civil-military relations. Here to explore all of this are White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor and Foreign Affairs and Defense correspondent Nick Schifrin. So, Nick, to you first, what steps have you learned that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, took around the time of the election?
In January, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, called his counterpart, General Zhuo Cheng. That's a photo of the two of them there, actually taken years before in Beijing. And what I'm about to report, Judy, is all from a defense official, 3 former senior defense officials, a former senior Trump administration official, and a senior congressional official. At the time, Milley was extremely concerned about what President Trump was capable of. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper had been terminated. The January 6th attack had just occurred, and senior Pentagon officials had been replaced with Trump loyalists. And so Milley talked every day with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. They worked together to try and ensure there was continuity right at the end of the Trump administration, ensure there was no surprises on national security. And part of that was reassuring adversaries that there was going to be continuity from Trump to Biden. That call was what Milley made to General Lee, that there was going to be no surprises. That's General Lee there. Now, the context for the call was back in October. That's when the Chinese, U.S. believed that the Chinese feared some kind of U.S. attack, some kind of October surprise. And so senior civilian Pentagon officials called their counterparts and reassured them that no, there was no imminent U.S. attack. As part of that reassurance, General Milley called his counterpart back in October to reassure him of the same thing. And we have some of the words from that call thanks to the Woodward Costa book. What General Milley told General Lee that time is, General Lee, you and I have known each other for 5 years. If we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time. It's not going to be a surprise. Now, those words, I'm going to call you ahead of time, are extraordinary, Judy. But these defense officials who I've been talking to emphasize that the message, the core message, what Milley was trying to say, reassurance, there is not going to be an attack by the U.S. on China, that was wrong, and that message of reassurance was the same thing that the Pentagon civilian leadership wanted.
Remarkable. Now, to Yamiche, from your reporting, who else have you learned that General Milley called?
Well, General Milley was taking extraordinary steps and having extraordinary conversations with a number of people, chief among them House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. This, of course, at the time on January 8th, when a call was made from Speaker Pelosi to General Milley saying, I want to know what you're doing to make sure that former President Trump is not allowed to misuse the nuclear codes or not allowed to get us into some sort of military action that is not wise. During that call, we want to put it up for folks, during that call, Speaker Pelosi said this of former President Trump. He's crazy. You know he's crazy. He's crazy. And what he did yesterday, referring to the Capitol siege, the Capitol attack on January 6th, what he did yesterday is further evidence of his craziness. And remarkably, General Milley replied, I agree with you on everything. Now, those are sources on Capitol Hill confirming those exact words to me tonight. And what this really shows you is that someone like General Milley, who is not seen as political, not seen as a Democrat or a Republican, here he is on the phone with a Democrat who is a target of former President Trump's anger, saying, I agree with you. I also want to point out another conversation that General Milley had, and that was with Gina Haspel. She was a former director of the CIA, and here's what Gina Haspel reportedly told General Milley. We are on the way to a right-wing coup. Again, going back to this idea of January 6th really shaking people up. It's extraordinary conversations really underlying the idea that former President Trump was seen as someone who was a loose cannon in his own administration.
And again, remarkable. And Nick, back to you. You've told us that you have an understanding now of what it was that General Milley did with regard to U.S. policy toward deploying nuclear weapons.
Right, so this is a routine meeting. I'm going to emphasize that, a routine meeting, even though the context, as Yamiche just explained, truly was extraordinary. So in January, there was a pre-scheduled quarterly check-in with Nuclear Command, and a defense official confirms that Milley reiterated that the reporting process included him, and that he should be called in the event of any nuclear order from the president. He made sure even that the participants at that meeting confirmed that they would call him. Now, technically, that is not the process. Nuclear authority is designed to be fast. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs is not in the chain of command. Even the Secretary of Defense isn't in the chain of command when it comes to launching a nuclear weapon. But there's an understanding, senior officials tell me, that many senior officials would be informed of in the event of any kind of nuclear order, and that's what Milley reiterated in January during that meeting.
Now, given all this, Yamiche, tell us what your sources inside the Biden White House and in the former Trump administration are saying to you about all this.
Officials inside the Biden White House are being very tight-lipped about this, though a couple of them are telling me that this underscores the idea that President Biden needed to run and needed to defeat former President Trump because he was unstable and not someone trusted even within his own administration by military officials. Now, in talking to a number of Trump allies and former Trump officials, they are very, very angry. They say that this in some ways really proves this idea of a deep state, that there were people working inside the Trump administration to try to undermine President Trump. Now, you have even Senator Marco Rubio, who is, of course, a Republican from Florida, he is now calling on President Biden to dismiss immediately General Milley, saying that he undermined the commander-in-chief. I also should point out that Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, this is someone who is not a Trump ally. He's someone who testified in Congress on that first impeachment of former President Trump when he said that he overheard that call between the President Trump and the president of Ukraine, saying that he was trying to dig for information against Joe Biden. He was alarmed and really reported that call to the National Security Council where he was working. He is now saying that General Mark Milley should resign because he broke the chain of command. So that's not just Trump allies, that's also a military official who himself found the actions of former President Trump to be unstable. But he, of course, feels like he went through the chain of command by really saying to his officials and his higher ups, this is what I'm concerned about. So this is really, in some ways, an extraordinary moment where you're seeing people who are not usually allied on the message saying General Milley here probably took a step too far. Of course, Democrats say these needed to happen because General Milley was trying to save and protect the country from a president who was, at the time, they believe, unstable.
Well, it is a developing story, and we thank both of you for this important reporting, Yamiche and Nick. Thank you both.
Okay, so that, of course, is, rather amazing story. Again, though it didn't come as a huge surprise to me. Again, I think at some point at the diner we were talking about something like that, definitely after January 6th. I think at one point and I think Jim might have said something, maybe we didn't even say it on air, where we were speculating about, what the Joint Chiefs might do, and did do on January 6th, and how they would react to a real attempted coup, essentially. Both before and after January 6th, we were talking about it. So this is not a huge surprise, but and I guess personally, I'm glad General Milley did this, regardless of I'm not the biggest fan of him. I think he should resign over other things. I think he and the entire Joint Chiefs and a bunch of other generals should resign over the conduct of the U.S. military over the past 2 decades. But that's another issue. Here, I think he did the exact right thing. Again, you're going to go back now and defrock Alexander Haig, who again was the one who was taking steps in the last days of the Nixon administration to ensure that no kind of nuclear attack order would be followed. Technically they are right that it's against the chain of command, but there's what's in the law, and then what's sensible for the continuing the human race. So here I would praise General Milley about nothing else. So Ken, what are your thoughts, having heard what went on here?
I have a question of you, Alex. You said something yada yada yada. If it had been a real coup, what are you implying?
Well, if it had been more of a well organized,
So January.
I'm not sure how a number of people think, and I'm somewhat agree with them, that it wasn't really a serious attempt just because of how poorly things were. That if it was a real, far right coup attempt, it would have been much better done. Essentially,
a couple of gas grenades and some machine guns.
Yeah, this was people were pointing out that when they got into the Capitol, they really had no idea what to do.
Yeah, and they were let in, right? So
right.
in effect, it's not for the media to call it a coup is inflammatory and partisan.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
What about
what do you think, Dennis? Yeah.
What about calling it an insurrection?
I agree with that. Yeah. But I think, when they were, and then people were comparing it to 9/11 or Pearl Harbor, that was,
Yeah. So anyhow, my question is, with General Haig, you said, intercede.
Yeah, Alexander Haig.
At what point did he do that? When did he do that? He was
Nixon's, in the last day of 74, in the last days of the Nixon presidency, right before he resigned. Remember, well, everybody knew in the White House that Nixon was. Remember, Nixon had a serious drinking problem. It got much worse in the. He was drinking all the time. I mean, just look at the film Nixon. The scenes. Anthony Hopkins playing him. He was seriously drunk in the last days, and they were very much worried that a drunk out of control Nixon might order a nuclear strike.
Right. Okay. So
He was also he was severely depressed, so maybe he wants to take down everybody with him. He's being irrational, so the chain of command was essentially instructed: if you get a nuclear attack order from the president, ignore it.
Right. I have a viewpoint on it. It's very simple.
Sure.
Sometimes, especially public officials, have to break the law. Like Eric, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his first name. Snowden. Is it Eric Snowden?
Yeah.
Is it Eric Snowden or something like that? I forget his first name.
Eric.
Eric Snowden. So, you have to break the law. That's all. And then
right, or Ellsberg. Ellsberg did the same thing.
That's right. You have to break the law. Then when it comes to judicial hearing, actually, you some form of judgment where you come to a jury of your peers, and your jury of your peers can.
In this case, he'll be forcing his resignation. Or I mean, Rubio is talking about having a court martial, which would be,
well, even if there's a court,
I don't think them. Thinking his fellow generals would another officer they probably would all vote no.
Right. So
just because of the deference to the superior.
Right. It just comes. No, wait a second. It comes to the society you live in, where the Supreme Court in the Gore Bush case said this is a ruling on this election. It has no it cannot be used.
It doesn't apply to any other election.
That's right. So, they decided, throw the books away. What's the best thing for the country here, or however they decided, or whatever. So if somebody breaks the law, so there's no doubt that he broke the chain of command. Okay, and it's a judgment call.
And you can make the argument that he should step down because he did that still, but that he was justified, but that he should still step down. That's right. That's a valid point of view.
He's been there long, retire, write some books, go on a TV show, whatever. But I'm just saying that's my viewpoint, is that there's times when you say, like the Russian guy who was on and didn't fire the missile. He took it on himself. You have to do that.
That was a little different because he actually never informed the higher up.
I know,
but it was a false report, and so he never even contacted his superiors to, I think at the time it would have been like Chernenko, or he didn't pass it up the chain of command. He just made the decision. I don't think the U.S. is actually attacking us.
I know that, but there have been so many false alerts and so many military accidents. I would favor anything that would be to suppress conflicts of any kind.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you got to give them credit for that. So I'm saying applause for the individual, but, that's all. You broke the law. Okay. So how do we maintain the law?
Well, it's not.
If you can't use that rule all the time everywhere.
Right.
Like I decided.
He broke military protocol. I'm not sure if there's a law. I don't think you could send him to jail for, I suppose you could, but I can't think of a case where they actually prosecuted a general for something, obviously they forced MacArthur to resign, but they didn't prosecute him over it.
Right.
Disobeying the orders of the president and so on.
I think the charges that they brought against Trump for impeachment were very spurious. It was just political. So,
again, if you weren't on when we were going, I always thought, I've been public to Jim and the rest of the guys about this. I always thought Russiagate was complete and total nonsense. In fact, I thought it was constructed at the intelligence agency to keep Trump from making any kind of détente with the Russians.
Yeah,
so they keep their defense spending going.
Hopefully, we don't retrograde back to like the Kennedy or like what's happening in Haiti. Let's have more civilized and
Sure, yeah.
Smooth it out, smooth it out. So
Well, it's also
that's
good
what
to
I
see
think.
that there are good contacts with the Chinese,
Yeah,
despite all of the stuff about, the new Cold War with China.
yeah,
That's well, to me, that's very
that's important.
cheering, because again, we get all the propaganda about, evil China. So it's good to know that, maybe the generals, they know it's a bunch of, BS, and they have good relations with the Chinese, like they do, like they did with the Soviets, to prevent any kind of misunderstanding or war. But
Right.
Dennis, what do you think about all of this and the Republicans here?
The Republicans are dangerous. I think they're fascists.
Right. I
And
mean, I don't remember what you were saying. Did you think Trump was literally crazy? Um, or do you have a different opinion of what what he was like with all this?
I think he's crazy.
No, you do. Okay. Yeah. I think it's somewhat, I mean,
I would say Milley did a good job, and
yeah,
so did
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah,
I mean,
rare opinion about her that, he or she did the right thing, if
right. I mean,
nothing else. Yeah.
these people were no. I think they were rational.
Yeah.
I think he's irrational. That's what
Yeah.
I think.
And yeah, I think he was being unstable. Yeah,
Did
it could have
you
been unstable. Yeah.
did you ever hear his? I don't know what the relationship was. Maybe it was his cousin. Maybe it was his niece. This woman who has a PhD in psychology wrote a book about.
No, no, no. Right. Yeah, psychiatry, I think. Yeah, and she wrote the book about the family and
No,
about how
she
his
just
dad had basically messed him up, essentially. Yeah.
right. I think he's. I always thought he was dangerous.
Right.
And I think the precautions of people in high level places like the Speaker of the House and the chief of staff of the military did their job basically.
Yeah.
And no, it's not just Trump and Nixon and people like that.
Yeah.
The, we are. Have you ever heard of Istan Mezaros?
No, no.
He's a historian. Well, he's dead now. He died in 2017. But I read he's considered one of the greatest Marxist philosophers of all time by Monthly Review. And I've read him in Monthly Review a lot. And the thing is, he said as a key thing that we're in a structural crisis. In other words, we're never getting out of the crisis.
I agree with that. Yeah. 100%.
Okay, and if we don't have structural change, which means moving towards socialism in a real way, we're never going to get out of this. And most of the things that we consider crises are symptoms of a declining empire and declining capitalism.
Yeah, we'll have a clip on that in a minute.
Right. So the thing is that we, meaning the left or left and progressives, need to figure out a way of taking power, basically.
Yeah.
And changing everything because it's going to be. I mean, the other thing is it could be like the Roman Empire. Roman Empire took 500 years to decline.
Collapse. Yeah. Well, yeah, about 200 again once they hit their height. I mean, I think they hit their height about the 2nd century. So maybe 2 or 3. They collapsed by the 5th century. So it's about 3 centuries again from their reaching their greatest extent to then the collapse. Yeah.
Okay, but the thing about it was that they had some really nutty emperors at some point.
Later on. Yes.
that caused a big problem. And I just see Trump is in that tradition.
Right. And hopefully we can avoid the kind of military coups that they had later on, with different emperors, one general starting a civil war, taking over, then another one comes along, and the Praetorian Guard offing emperors to put somebody they liked in charge. But and I definitely could see that as a potential, and we know that the French revolutionaries and our founding fathers, they had the fall of the Roman Republic in mind, as a warning, not to, just like the Bolsheviks were worried about a Bonaparte coming along after 1917 and putting an end to the Russian Revolution. So it's always been, out there. So.
That's why. By the way, Lenin had what was he called? Oh, the Tsar. The Tsar and his family killed on purpose to because he was afraid they would be restored to the throne.
Sure. The West would, if they just let them go into exile, they would. Right, and you can see it again in all the nutty stories about Anastasia somehow surviving, which we know are nonsense.
Right, that was a movie too.
But they still had the hope. There was a hope that there was some Romanov out there that could be restored. But I think Frederick, the author Frederick Forsyth he did a book in the 90s about the British intelligence finding some descendant of the Romanovs and installing him to, take over the country. I forget the title of it. It was a real, plot that he, and who knows, maybe MI6 did think of something like that. But it was an actual book that they did that. So it's, it's out there in the ether. But so yesterday, after again we had the clip about Haiti's prime minister being potentially charged by the prosecutor in the case of the assassination of President Moise. Now he is fired, that prosecutor. So that, of course, is one. So this, of course, is creating a constitutional crisis that we don't see yet how it's if it can be resolved. Obviously, this is like something like the Saturday Night Massacre with to go back to Nixon again, when he kept firing attorney general after attorney general until he got Robert Bork to fire special prosecutor, was it Archibald Cox, right? To try and end the investigation of him.
Yes.
Got a clip, yeah. All right, well, let's go back again.
Ariel Henry, Haiti's new prime minister, a former minister of labor, a former neuropathologist, now a suspect in the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse. On Tuesday, Haiti's top prosecutor recommended charges against Henry over Moïse's killing. Henry responded by swiftly and publicly firing that chief prosecutor, whose replacement was sworn in within hours. The prime minister has insisted he's innocent in the Moïse affair.
The actions to create confusion and prevent justice will not be allowed to happen. The real culprits, the masterminds, those responsible for the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse will be brought to justice and punished for their acts.
Moïse was shot to death in the early hours of July 7th when a group of commandos posing as U.S. drug enforcement agents stormed his residential compound. Dozens have been arrested in the wake of the raid, including 18 former Colombian soldiers and 2 Haitian Americans. But several key suspects remain at large, including a fugitive former employee of the Justice Ministry's anti-corruption unit, whom Henry has publicly defended. Prosecutors say the prime minister spoke with that suspect twice by telephone on the night of Moïse's assassination. Henry dismissed their requests to question him as political theater, and only the country's president has the authority to compel a sitting prime minister to undergo interrogation. The Constitution also stipulates, however, that prosecutors can only be fired or appointed by the president. A position that remains vacant since Moise's death.
So yeah, so again, the Constitution is whether he's not supposed to be able to fire the guy. So this office is going to be, again, I haven't heard anything more in terms of anything that's been happening in Haiti, but this is going to clearly make things worse. And it's, of course, entirely possible that Henri here is involved in this assassination, especially, again, if they have phone calls from him to the assassin or people to the assassin or people connected to the mercenaries from Colombia that were involved. Again, almost every Haitian, even not the lefty ones, are convinced that it was an inside job because of how they essentially let the mercenaries in to get to him, and fully bought the story about, oh, we're with the DEA. Kind of, the presidential guard essentially stood down and let him get shot, and then they were able to. There's no reaction. They were able to. It took them until the next day to track down the assassins and arrest them, and they were staying at this place that's connected with this other oligarch. So it's there's reason to think that they wanted Moise gone and wanted basically someone better to run the country. And so again, Henri, he could have stepped into the position, so he would, cui bono, who benefits? He would be one of them. So he's, again, especially if they have, again, phone calls from him connecting him to the assassins, then, of course, whether this is going to lead to him being prosecuted, arrested, who the hell knows at this point again. Haiti is such a matter, Dennis.
Well, the problem is the U.S.
Yeah. But not just the U.S., there's a whole international troika, including the French and
Right.
Canadians, who basically determine
Right,
what goes
okay.
on in Haiti and been essentially explaining the country for literally centuries, the reason Haiti is so poor is because the French forced them to pay reparations for ending slavery and becoming independent, that they only paid off, a few decades ago. They literally paid it for over a century. It was so onerous, the terms and the size of the debt that they were forced to pay for freeing themselves from French subjugation. With the idea that, well, if you don't pay us, we'll just invade you again. So they essentially extorted. And really, again, the French should pay back the entire money with interest to rebuild the country. But of course, that's never going to happen in the current international environment. But Ken, what's your? I mean, you probably don't have as big a Haitian community over in LA as we do in here in New York.
We have a big one in New Jersey too. I know.
Yeah. I
Well,
remember
I
since
just-
I speak. Yeah.
I have a question. I've spent some
Sure,
time
sure.
in Long Island, and it looks like that's where they were
Uh-huh.
holding that meeting in a pizza parlor outside in Long Island somewhere, rather than a palace.
Mhm.
Did you see that the fixtures and the flags and everything looked like a garden, a small mall?
Yeah.
Why aren't they in the palace? Don't they have a palace or?
Oh well, actually the presidential palace was destroyed by the earthquake years ago. So actually,
Oh.
Moise was living in his own private residence. It's never been rebuilt. Despite all the aid that they've gotten, again, it's all been kind of corruptly, given to this and that person, siphoned by the power, the oligarchs of Haiti. So yeah, so the presidential palace has not been rebuilt since I think it's the 2008 earthquake. That was so devastating. So that's one reason why they couldn't hold this meeting at a place like that. Yeah.
Other than the I'm really ignorant on this basis. I've discussed this with people, the difference between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Now,
Well, Haiti is the French-speaking side of Hispaniola.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but they're on the same island. But that
Yeah,
earthquake was extremely west end of Haiti, so it didn't affect the Dominican Republic much. Maybe
Well,
not.
the anthropologist Jared Diamond makes a good point that because of the different colonial traditions, the Spanish versus the French, on the Haitian side, they actually did much more deforestation because of again different government policies again under the French colonial rule. So they basically destroyed all of their their forest and really just devastated their own, their soil and own lands by overusing it too much. And that kind of tradition essentially continued into the modern era. So that's a major reason why Haiti is so much poorer than, in addition, again, to the huge debt that the French made them take on. But that's also a factor. Is again, remember Jared Dowdy, he's that guy who writes that great book, um, not Guns and Butter. It's about guns, germs, and steel.
Right.
Right. It's a great book again, and he makes this point in one of the chapters where he's talking about underdevelopment and in an historical sense, yeah. So he
Well,
makes
isn't there
different.
any political power influencing Haiti besides the United States and France, say like Brazil or Colombia or
Actually, under
Cuba?
yeah, no, the Cubans, the Venezuelans under Chavez provided them with free oil. But the Haitian government just turned again the program into a big, money grab. But yeah, Cuba's helped them at times. Again, you can literally look across. Cuba's close enough to Haiti that if you're in certain parts of the island, you can on a good day you can see to the Cuban coast. It's that close. And yeah, and the Brazilian under Lula, Brazil actually did a lot of nasty stuff. It's one of the things to criticize Lula about to join in kind of the exploitation, but it's mostly the real bad actors against the U.S., France, and Canada.
Oh, Canada?
Canada, no, Canada. There are Canadian mining companies and Canadian contractors who, and peacekeepers. Also, of course, the UN has. Well, no, you might not have heard this, Ken, but the UN, when with their peacekeeping force, again, I use peacekeeping in quotes because of what they did. They started a cholera epidemic in the 2000s after living there.
No, wait a second. Wait a minute. Hold it a minute. That sentence indicates intent. They started a cholera epidemic.
They did not properly deal with their sanitation issues. They essentially polluted. They didn't bother to get rid of their literally their crap. They didn't properly they just let it get dumped into the drinking water into the rivers, and so big surprise, it led to a cholera epidemic that killed thousands of Haitians.
Estimates 55% of the population is Catholic, 29%
Okay.
Protestant,
Yeah,
2.1%
yeah.
Voodoo.
You playing something on your?
No, I was just looking up something.
So that was a direct result. I mean, the UN knew, and not only again once people realized what was happening and that the UN was responsible, the UN not only never took responsibility, or they did nothing to stop it for years. And again, there was also, as happens with a lot of peacekeeping forces, there was an epidemic of rape by the peacekeepers of Haitian women. And even things like essentially trafficking of individuals by some of, not just the UN, but some of the NGOs. And of course, we know Bill Clinton's person. His disingenuous apology that he destroyed Haiti's rice industry by flooding it with cheap Arkansas rice, forcing them to eliminate their protective tariffs that were protecting their farmers, and that made a lot of Haitians much poorer because they didn't have they couldn't compete with cheaper American goods.
So okay, great.
We've been doing great damage to them for 2 centuries now, personally. we've never forgiven them for ending slavery. And we thought that Jefferson thought they were a threat to cause a slave rebellion here in the U.S. because Haiti is the only successful slave revolution in all of human history, where they succeeded in taking over.
Well, you got the Jews leaving, an exodus.
Well, again, we don't know if that actually happened. That's a religious text, so we have no idea if that actually happened. But
All right.
this is the only recorded. Let's put it this way: the only recorded case. I mean, Spartacus had a good shot, but again, he didn't succeed in none of the other rebellions against the Roman Republic or Empire by the slaves.
Right. Haiti succeeded. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Let's go on. I'm waiting for the Noam Chomsky cut.
Okay, well, but first, again, I think Dennis will also enjoy this one, which this is the end of Richard Wolff's. He's talking here about what he thinks is going to be a big factor in China basically kicking our ass in the next few years. But here, I'll have to start it up here.
Let me come to the last part of this story. There is another way that decay is happening. Decline is happening. Only this time the focus won't be on what's happening in and to the United States. This time the focus is on the relativity of decline. The fact that decline sometimes really means somebody else is rising and you're not, and so you are declining relative to the ascendancy of the other. And that ascendancy I want to talk to you about now is the People's Republic of China. It is the ascending global power. That is why the United States has turned, first under Obama, then more with Trump, and now with Biden, to be more and more shrill in its hostility. It's a little childish. It's, quite theatrical, but there it is. The big new enemy isn't terrorism the way it was, isn't the Soviet Union the way it was, it isn't in the Middle East the way it was, it is now China. What's this about? China is in the ascendancy. I could give you the statistics, but I've done that in the past. But I'll summarize them. Over the last quarter century, that's a long time, Chinese economic growth, the annual growth of their GDP, which measures the total output of goods and services in China, it has risen on the average 6 to 9% per year. Over the same 25 years, the annual growth of the GDP of the United States has risen on average 2 to 3%. It's not even close. The People's Republic of China has been growing for 25 years, 3 times faster than the United States, which is why the Chinese have caught up and are expected within a decade to be a larger economic entity in the world than the United States, and that will be the first time anything like that has happened in nearly a century. Wow. There is a relative decline. Let me give you the other major statistic. Over the last 25 years, wages in the United States have been stagnant. And by that, I mean real wages. What you can afford to buy with whatever your wages is. So in other words, it takes into account the money wage you get, but it also takes into account the prices you have to pay with that money wage so that we can get a sense of what you can afford to buy. Americans over the last 25 years have seen virtually no increase in their real wage. Some statistics say it has increased over 25 years by 10%. If that were true, it would be something like 0.3 or 0.4% per year. That's incredibly slow, even by the standards of the United States' rising wages in the previous century. But here comes the real shocker. Over the same 25 years, the real wages in China quadrupled. They went up 300 to 400%, depending on the different estimates. Not 10%. There's no contest. The mass of people in China are living on a scale they couldn't have imagined they could achieve. And so we have almost the ultimate example in the last few weeks. It's a China that has taken the following steps, punishing some of the biggest corporations in their country, demanding huge payments and getting them, which are to be used, ready, to improve low-income jobs, pay them more, provide more benefits. And the argument the Chinese make is, we are now rich enough, even though we're far behind the United States still, we're rich enough to be much less unequal than we are. And we're committed to making big changes painful to large corporations. And by the way, they really are painful. You know how we know? Because the prices of the stocks of those corporations, both in China and in the New York stock market, have dropped as investors are shocked by the amount of profits they're not going to get because they're going to make for a more equivalent, a more equal society. That is China's secret strategy, friends. They're not going to confront the United States militarily. They're going to decide and try not to. They're going to compete by growing faster and growing more equal, and to pull the rug out in the competition with the United States in an area for which the United States is not prepared and is in fact going the other way, growing slower and becoming more unequal. It's a brilliant strategy created by the very decline of the United States that I've tried to make clear in my presentation today. Thank you as always.
All right. So again, I think that's as he says, a brilliant strategy. And it looks like, again, based on what she's been saying, that's again that they are trying to rein in their corporations, reduce inequality. And again, you can tell that it's happening because people like George Soros are screaming about it and saying, "Oh, how horrible it is that communist China is, might want to essentially do looks like their own version of like a New Deal, though, not saying it." So Dennis, I'm sure you have some thoughts on, I know you listen to Professor Wolf as well. So what are your thoughts on what he has to say here about China and their strategy?
Right. I actually heard this on the radio. I agree with him. There is by the way, there's I guess an introduction to the July-August monthly review by John Bellamy Foster. I might have sent it out. It's called The New Cold War on China. And he indicates, see, what we thought at the end of the Mao era was that the capitalist rotors had taken over. They were the enemies within the Central Committee of Mao, and they fought it out during the Cultural Revolution and other times. And Monthly Review has that same view that I have, that China was not going to succeed if it just became a capitalist country. And what they have done is they switched. The leader was Mao until he died in 1976. And then in 1979, Deng Xiaoping took over, and he stressed production, capitalist production. And that's what we thought was happening. And then we saw Tiananmen Square, which was 1989, where basically, Deng Xiaoping gave the order to fire. He sent tanks in, and they fired on the protesters, which we saw on television. It was like really strange. One Friday night, I was looking, and there was Dan Rather in Tiananmen
So I
Square.
don't know if you know, Dennis. There's the actual number killed is almost certainly much less than was reported. Because I'll send you the link. There's a really good documentary these guys did called "The Gates of Heavenly Peace." It's a two-part thing that's 3 hours total that interviewed the people involved and points out that actually not that actually well, first off, a bunch of Chinese soldiers were killed by the demonstrators. So the violence was not one way. You know, it's not peaceful protesters who got shot down by the army. In fact, some of them were, and in fact, again, there were not a lot of people killed in the square. And again, these guys, you can see again, WikiLeaks. Some of the WikiLeaks files went back to this period. And so there's a report from, I think, the Portuguese embassy that said, you know, the Portuguese diplomats had like went to the local hospitals in Beijing, and they're like, oh, we're not seeing, you know, we're only seeing a few dead bodies and, you know, a few injured. So they estimated that it was maybe like 200 to 300 that had been killed. So it was, and there was clearly again, I mean, the CIA literally got the pro democracy people that like fled the country and went to Hong Kong and then left. They were helped by the CIA, so there's definite CIA involvement in the protests themselves. So it's not, you know, it's not the nice little democracy thing that people have wanted to. I'll send you the link. It's a very good documentary.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
But
In fact, again, one of them, this one woman who later became like a hedge fund trader when she went to work for Wall Street. She got a she went to Princeton off her celebrity and then went to work for Wall Street. So she was supposed to be this like, you know, socialist, but she sold out when she came here. And in the interview that she did with one Western Reporter, she says, you know, we need basically the people to die for us. But while she says, you know, I'm not going to risk my life for this, but you know, other people basically should die so we can have the revolution.
Alex, send me the copy too, please.
Yeah, I'll send you too. It's a very good friend of mine, Ed Chen, pointed out to me once in a while. I was like, wow, I've never heard. Again, it's one of these, you know, because of course the West doesn't want you to know about that side of the story.
No, you just send it out to our whole list. Actually.
Yeah. I will.
Because
okay.
Because if you read, you can look this up. The new Cold War on China is in the July-August monthly review, and it's the introduction to that issue, and you can just type it in and see it. But what you're telling me, which I didn't know before, goes along pretty much with what John Bellamy Foster is saying, because he's changing his view of China. And it started with, there was an article by the late Samir Amin called China 2013, which he gives a view of China which is different from that.
Yeah, and again, I've had these arguments with people. I mean, I think China's a lot more socialist than we think, because the important thing is that the party and the government controls the banks. The banks are not independent. There is no independent finance sector, which again is one of the reasons someone like Soros despises someone like Xi and thinks he should be overthrown. You know, this guy here too. So again, I thought this was, again, within the same, this was a pretty interesting contrast. I don't think it's absolutely based on this new book, China Coup, that claims that Xi is about to be overthrown, that I think is complete nonsense, but I thought it'd be interesting to play.
Let me say this, all the agricultural land is still owned by the state.
And there still are state-owned enterprises.
Right.
They haven't privatized everything the way
Right.
the West would hope. And, again, capitalists are members of the party, but they're not dominant in the party. Obviously there's corruption, but, Xi in part is dealing with that. And of course, the fact that he's dealing, or that he might say execute a corrupt official like Bo Xilai, is that he used to say, oh, he's a dictator. But he's operating within the party. And also I think, well, this you'll see this clip is very, it's the typical Western nonsense where they just don't understand this other political system or culture. Right. They're just, they're going to turn it to be just like us. Yeah.
Well, what they don't understand is dialectical thinking.
No. Right.
That was the key. As far as Mao was concerned, the key was Marxism. That's what he said won the revolution.
And I forget Xi's dad's name. He's also Xi something. He's, again, I think he was he wasn't an extreme Maoist, but I don't think he was with Deng's faction. So Xi himself comes from, again, a somewhat more left part of the Communist Party in that.
Right. What John Bellamy Foster has said is that we now have 3 different periods in China. One was the Maoist period.
Right.
The second was the Deng Xiaoping period, where they just stressed development. And now they're stressing even what she is saying is that they have uneven development. That's the key, and he wants to change that.
Which will be better for not just the people of China, but it's shown, we know statistically, economists can tell you, a more equal economy will grow faster. Because, again, rich people don't spend money. Rich people hoard money. So the fact that we've become more unequal, one of the most unequal in the OECD, is a big reason we have this incredibly slow growth rate for decades now, because we're so unequal and getting more unequal. So again, as
the people
Professor Wolf points out, they're going to grow faster because they're more unequal. So I think they're more equal. Yeah.
Right, I agree with that.
Yeah. So let's again see what this guy has to say, because it was an interesting contrast. He's actually a former British diplomat who claims, again, to know a lot about China, but I don't think does. But let's go back.
Chinese leader Xi Jinping is widely regarded today as the country's most powerful leader since Mao Zedong. But one China watcher predicts that he will soon be removed from office. We'll talk more about that in a moment, but first, a quick overview of the power Xi has amassed. In November 2012, he was elected Communist Party General Secretary and Chairman of the party's Central Military Commission, making him China's paramount leader. A few months later, he launched a national anti-corruption drive, which many see as having been conducted outside the framework of due process. Now, it's seen the downfall of hundreds of thousands of officials and functionaries. In 2018, the National People's Congress abolished term limits for the president and vice president, making Xi a potentially lifelong leader. And in 2020, Xi called anti-monopoly efforts against online firms one of the country's chief goals. A speech by Alibaba founder Jack Ma criticizing the party is said to have infuriated Xi. And joining me now in studio is Roger Garside, a former British diplomat and longtime China watcher. He's also the author of the book China Coup, The Great Leap to Freedom. In it, Mr. Garside claims China is set to transition to democracy after a successful coup against President Xi Jinping. Welcome to Berlin and to DW News Asia, Roger Garside.
Thank you, Biresh. It's great to be here.
It's quite a prediction to make, a transition to democracy, but before that, a coup that ousts President Xi Jinping.
Yes.
Why do you say that? On the basis of what?
Well, 3/4 of the book is factual, 1/4 is semi-fictional. And the 3/4 says why. This dictatorship, which is a totalitarian dictatorship, not an authoritarian regime. This totalitarian dictatorship is outwardly strong, but inwardly weak. And I could run through some of the weaknesses if you like.
But then when you say it's weak, you're saying that that is what is going to lead to a coup? So it's going to be something that will happen from within the ranks of the Communist Party? Is that what you're saying?
Within the top ranks of the Communist Party, but with an external force acting as well. The US and its allies have got to adopt a more aggressive strategy towards China. We can't dictate how China is governed, but we can and must engineer events so that we help those who want to free China to do so.
So let me understand this. Until the time there is this external stimulus from the US and allies, and the liberal West is what you're referring to, there is no coup in China. Is that what you're saying? You almost seem to sound that you're laying out a prescription of how to bring about regime change in China.
Yes, but it's not a question, as I say, of dictating or imposing a change on China, but with working within the forces, with the forces which are within, to achieve a free China. Very recently, the highest level defector from China to the US since 1949 came out and said just what I said, that just what I say in the book, which was written before she ever spoke in public. She is saying that based on 15 years teaching ideology to the senior party cadres at the National Central Party School, she believes that 60 to 70% of senior officials of the party regard constitutional government and democratic government as the best recipe for stability and human rights defense in China.
Right, but I wonder if they will act. And the reason I ask this is because they're against a man, President Xi Jinping, who has declared himself effectively president for life. And he is, I think, the only leader after Mao Zedong to have this much amount of power in China. Since 2013, when he took over, he began a very popular anti-corruption campaign, which effectively got rid of rivals. Therefore, I ask you, are these rivals there, and are they going to be able to act?
The rivals are there, and they can be enabled and helped to act if we, the liberal democracies, adopt the right strategy and tactics. And let me illustrate, I illustrate this in the book, but events have been moving very much in line with my predictions since I stopped writing in 2019. US Congress has adopted measures which will lead to a confrontation between financial markets, between financial regulators, between the US and China. The US is insisting Chinese companies listed, traded in the US, 248 of them, reveal, share information which the Chinese government has always. And when that law bites in the US, there will be a confrontation of beginning in the financial field, but will rapidly become political.
Right. Quick last question. When do you see this?
Well, it could happen before November 22. Why? Why? Because that is the date by which we expect the next National Party Congress of the Communist Party of China to take place and to...
All right, well, I guess that's...
anoint
keep doing that, so
for a further
again,
5 years.
Let's see.
So if these...
there's the more wishful thinking, I think, from this former British diplomat. One thing is just, well, I mean, even if there was, I mean, I could see, you know, Xi Jinping moving, you know, being removed by rivals in the party. You know, that's not the first time that's happened in Chinese communist politics. But the idea that, oh, that's going to lead to a jump to democracy is one defector says that 70% of the party members believe in democracy, and you're just going to, yeah. So, Ken, Dennis, what do you give any, after listening to this guy, do you think he's got anything, or this is just, Western wishful thinking that, everybody's going to become like us?
I would agree with you. Western wishful thinking.
Ken?
Well, can you hear me? I'm having some troubles here.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so I spent about a little bit over 2 months in China, and both of these guys, all three of them. Well, I mean, what's the first guy's name?
Richard Wolff,
Professor
Professor
Richard
Richard
Wolff.
Wolff.
Sorry.
No problem.
Richard Wolff, this guy, they're all talking theoretical and everything, and they're not taking any look at the traditions of the Chinese culture, the actual people there. They just, pull out numbers and say these are the relevant numbers and ignore everything else. So,
Wow.
they're not looking at things. Is it good? First of all, is it good for a country to expand at 25, quadruple every 10 years? GDP keeps going up. What are you going to do when you get to the top? What are you going to do when everybody's got 3 cars and 4 TV sets and 6,
Right.
An elevator in each house? What are you going to do? You're going to give everybody a spaceship? You can get to a point of saturation where you run out of market.
Right.
So I mean, that's one of the flaws of capitalism. It's only designed to expand. It's not designed to maintain or contract. What I would love to see a political party come up and say, and in a sense, the Greens do this, say we're going to cut back on everything.
Yeah.
People don't work so much,
Yeah.
consume so much, don't breed so much. Let's slow down, and
Yeah.
going one way or another. He says, well, we're losing because they're expanding. So, he's not taking into effect a lot of things. And I don't want to go through what I've observed when I was there. But for the most part,
Sure.
people are just casting statements out that are irrelevant. But I do think the president, Xi, or however you pronounce his name, Xi Jinping, is that it? Something in that.
Xi Jinping.
Xi Jinping. Okay. So I think he's been doing a very good job. I think China is a demonstration of communism well done, because he's taken a nation, a third world nation, and moved it up into a first world status. And it's sure there's going to be poverty around the country, but it has raised most votes up. And there's always problems. There's always corruption.
Right.
There's always abuses, human rights problems. But China's doing very well. I'm not even.
They literally raised 800 million people out of poverty.
That's right.
From dang on.
How about giving them a hand? You know what I mean?
And they have a very well-educated, disciplined workforce. I mean, you got to give them credit.
And all of that. And they built, and somebody made a statement the other day. I don't know. A national speed railroad all over the country.
Yeah. Oh, the high-speed rail. Yeah, that that of course doesn't exist here. I mean, hell, the French have a pretty, and Europe, the Germans have pretty good high-speed rail too. But God forbid they should build what they had, that they were going to do something in California, right, Ken? But that never happened, right?
Well, no. We live in a democracy to a degree. And then China's a totalitarian state.
Well, France isn't a democracy. They have high-speed rail.
France, yeah, right. But I'm just bringing out, like a guy in China said, when building the high-speed rail, some worker said, "Oh, there's a mountain in the way," and so the guy in charge of working crew said, "Don't worry about it. They'll be gone in a week." And they just bring 100,000 people out there and get rid of the mountain. Totalitarian, so you don't have to argue about.
Or they drill a tunnel through it. Yeah.
That's right. So there they go. They get a lot done a lot faster. It's one of the advantages of a totalitarian state. if you have a somewhat benign dictator or head of state, you can do okay.
Sure.
And I'm getting messages. I think I'm
Hell,
starting.
even Mussolini got the trains to run.
I just wanted to make a comment about Dick Wolf. I used to find him entertaining.
Sure.
He's got a very interesting way of talking, like he's hammering nails into a piece of wood, one nail at a time. It's very reminiscent of, the guy who was running for president got kicked out by the Democrats. The one that's the left, the Socialist Party guy who. Come on.
Howie Hawkins.
No. The guy who was almost got the Democratic nominee.
Oh, you mean Sanders?
Sanders, right? So Sanders talks with the same kind of New York.
It's a Brooklyn accent.
It's hang it. So he used to be entertaining in a sense, but I mean, it gets to be annoying, He's making narrative statements in his opinion, and this is what it should be, and that's the way you make Kishka, and you don't make it any other way, because if you make it some other way, it's not Kishka, that's all. Like your grandfather, that's all. So he's popular, I know, but I mean, it's not based in fact. And he's being too assertive, and the other guy, look, it's okay. Freedom of speech. People can postulate, put out whatever they believe.
I'm sure there are plenty of people we know there are plenty of people at Pacifica who make these kind of declarative, statements on their shows.
Not that many. I mean, not as many. Not like Richard Wolff.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. He's really
Don't think so. Okay.
He's like Trump. A little bit. Different cadence, but it's like, and this is amazing, right? This was awesome. Nobody ever did this like I did it.
Right. This is the bestest ever.
This is the bestest ever. We need a new word for bestest or something, because there's never been this best. So that's Trump, Anyhow, that's enough chit chat. When are we going to get to the?
Okay, let me just play this about Afghanistan, and then we'll finish with the Chomsky clip, which I'm sure Dennis will enjoy.
Chomsky.
We can play that for a while. Again, we won't play the whole thing because the whole thing is like 20 minutes. But we'll play about 10 minutes of it where he talks about.
What you can do with Chomsky, since it's Chomsky that's in YouTube, increase the playback rate to 1.25.
Where do I do that?
There's a little wheel at the bottom of the YouTube thing. See that little gear? A gear.
The settings. Okay, so I.
No, click on that. It says playback.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I was reading about so change it to HD. Let's see.
No, forget the HD, but you got the playback speed.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So change that to what you were saying.
Try 1.25. It won't be that much of a distortion.
All right. Okay, so let's play this.
This is Afghanistan.
Well, no, he's talking about 9/11. You see. He will talk about Afghanistan, but he's and again he's going to bring in Allende. He's going to go into the whole evils of the American empire. So he's going to make the usual arguments about which he's made before. I'm sure you've read Dennis knows him. I'm sure backwards and forwards. So.
Humanitarian intervention by freeing the patents and allowing foreign governments to make the vaccine is particularly interesting in light of the fact that the US was running a fake vaccination program in Pakistan to try to get information about Osama bin Laden, and it undermined real humanitarian efforts to give people medical care. And so you see that there are a few wings of US imperialism. One is financial, one is military might, and the other is medical care. And it's coming to a head during the pandemic in a horrifying way, because you have a government that has systematically undermined the trust of its medical facilities and medical interventions domestically and abroad. And now is the moment when the United States could be poised to actually do good on a mass scale with the vast amounts of wealth and privilege and resources this country has. And even if it were to do that, it's hard to think that these other countries could trust those efforts after years and years and years of this kind of brutal bait and switch campaigning and trickery. And I wanted to talk about the ways in which the US media rehabilitates this image. So one particular example, I think key example from this time, is George Bush, who was rehabilitated in the eyes of the liberal establishment. He started out as evil incarnate, rushing us into a war we had no business starting, into two wars we had no business starting. Then he was turned into a kind of bumbling oaf that ran interference for like Dick Cheney, who was the mastermind behind the scenes. And now he's become a sort of lovable, folksy painter, friend of Michelle Obama. We've seen the media talking about how Biden botched the withdrawal, and they're saying that he can't recover from this, and maybe this will be a turning point in public opinion. It could crush the Democrats' chances in later elections. But Bush has escaped, it seems, any kind of blame for his role as a war criminal. Can you talk about the way that the media sort of whitewashes its own recent history, and also why? Why does it do that?
A Dropbox family plan gives you and 5 loved ones your very own Dropbox account to store memories from the past.
Take Henry Kissinger, honored, one of the worst war criminals in modern history. It's hard to even take, say, Cambodia, 1970. Kissinger loyally followed his master, Richard Nixon, and transmitted orders of a kind that I don't think ever have appeared in the historical record. Orders to the American Air Force, said massive bombing campaign in Cambodia, anything that flies against anything that moves. See if you can find an analog to that in the historical record among the Nazis, among anyone. Well, and it wasn't just words. It led to a horrendous bombing campaign, horrific bombing campaign, which turned the Khmer Rouge at the time had been a small guerrilla group, a couple thousand people. By the end of the bombing campaign, which devastated rural Cambodia, there were hundreds of thousands of enraged peasants. Well, then came ugly actions, which we can blame on them. Okay, but that's one Henry Kissinger. Go to India. Henry Kissinger supported the Pakistani destruction of East Bengal. Huge number of people killed, maybe a million or more. He threatened India with punishment if India dared to try to put an end to the huge slaughter. What were the reasons? He didn't want to he had a planned photo op where he was going to secretly go to China and meet, Mao and shake hands, and would be détente, would be very exciting. And he had to go through Pakistan to get there. And all of this slaughter was undermining his photo op. Okay, so let's kill a million Bengalis. What about Chile? Kissinger was the point man, pressing hard for the overthrow of the Allende government. 2 tracks. One track was just straight in violence, military coup. Then there was a soft track, make the economy scream, make it impossible for people to live. Okay. They finally got what they wanted, instituted a vicious dictatorship, which incidentally was the first 9/11. What happened in 2001 was the second 9/11. The first one was much worse by any measure. We translate it to per capita terms, which is the right way. It would be as if on what we call 9/11, 30,000 people had been killed outright. 500,000 had been tortured. The government was overthrown. A vicious dictatorship instituted. Terror, torture, horrors, celebrated not only by the United States, celebrated it, poured funds in to help the new dictatorship. International agencies did the same. They'd been withholding funds from Allende, poured them in. The neoliberals, people who've been running the world for the last 40 years, loved it. They moved in to advise the government. Friedrich Hayek, the moral leader of neoliberalism, visited and said he was impressed by the freedom under Pinochet. Said he couldn't find a single person in Chile who didn't think there was more freedom under Pinochet dictatorship than under Allende. Somehow he couldn't hear the cries of anguish from the torture chambers in the Via Grimaldi and others. Well, that's the reaction to the first 9/11. I'm sure there are jihadis who celebrated the second 9/11. We think they're terrible. We're much worse. Take a look at ourselves. Is anybody going to talk about that on the anniversary of 9/11? Maybe you will. I will. A handful of other people will be denounced, of course. But it's true. That was the first 9/11, much worse than what happened in September 2001. Okay, goes on. So if you want to know what we can do, we can begin by educating ourselves, by rising to some minimal moral level so we can pay attention to what we do and what we have done. Just take this notion of forever wars that's being bandied about. Biden ended the forever wars. When did the forever wars start? Well, 1783. 1783, the British pulled out. That freed the colonists from the yoke that the British had imposed. They had prevented the colonists from invading what was called Indian country, the Indian nations, to the west of the Appalachian Mountains. British had blocked that. Colonists weren't accepting that. Certainly not people like George Washington, major land speculator, wanted to go out and exterminate the Indians, who he said will disappear. They are like wolves. They will disappear like the wolves, George Washington. Immediately, the colonists launched murderous, brutal wars against the Indian nations. Extermination, dispersal, treaties broken. I mean, every horror you can think of. They knew what they were doing. The leading figure, the intellectual architect of Manifest Destiny, John Quincy Adams, in his later years, he lamented what he called the fate of that hapless race of Native Americans who we are exterminating with such malicious atrocities. That was long after his own contributions, major contributions to the process. And that was before the worst of it. Then it went on to California, where it was truly genocidal. Well, we finally, there's a famous diplomatic history. You can buy a copy of it, well-known diplomatic history of the United States by Thomas Bailey, who discusses this. He says it was defensive. He said after the colonists got their freedom, they turned to the task of, I'm quoting, felling trees and Indians and expanding to their natural borders. Meanwhile, picking up half of Mexico in the process, robbing Hawaii from its natives. That's forever wars. The United States has been at war practically every year since it was founded. Well, there were some victims. What about asking them about the costs? They have voices. Most of them were exterminated, but there's some who are left, and they left records. So we can ask about the forever wars. Nobody's going to ask that, I don't think. It's the forever wars that cost us too much. So there's a good article in the current issue of Foreign Affairs, one of the lead articles of the main establishment journal. It's called something like The Cost of the Afghan War to the United States. Yes, it's a very serious cost, trillions of dollars to the United States. What about the people who we've been exterminating and attacking and destroying for 250 years, ever since the country was founded? Goes on. There's an article in the New York Times today by a nice person, Samuel Moyn, good, decent guy, about how the United States is turning to more humanitarian wars. He says they're still terrible, but they're more humanitarian than before. And he gives an example. George First Bush, the statesman Bush, his first invasion of Kuwait, then Iraq, he says, much more humanitarian than earlier wars. Was it? I mean, American army sank to the level as the Iraqi army, of course, was totally overwhelmed by U.S. force as they were retreating from Kuwait. The peasant conscripts, poor conscripts, Shiite Kurdish conscripts who were conscripted by Saddam to fight the war, were trying to flee. But the American army was using bulldozers to shovel them into ditches to suffocate them, so they couldn't flee. And then, well, George Bush was orating about how what we say goes. His Air Force was destroying completely undefended infrastructure throughout Iraq. Okay, this was incidentally a war also which never had to be fought. There were plenty of options for diplomatic settlement. Press refused to report them. The U.S. government just dismissed them. Could tell you more details about this if there were time, but could have been a war that was avoided. In fact, though this will outrage millions of people, the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait was not all that different from the U.S. invasion of Panama a couple of months earlier. Could go into the details. I've written about it.
Okay, guys. So Ken, what's your response to Chomsky making his usual arguments that and drawing talking about the parts of 9/11 that we don't want to think about, being critical of the U.S. here. You there, Ken? Or Dennis, while we wait for Ken, I'm sure you have thoughts. I know how much you appreciate what Chomsky has to say. So, you there, Dennis? You guys hearing me?
I'm trying to connect with
yeah. Yeah. Oh,
is my mic on?
You're breaking up, Ken. Okay, now we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was going to say, I want to send Chomsky a get well card. He's not looking too good. That's the main thing. And he was talking about the 9/11.
Well, he is 90 something. He's 90 something, right?
Oh, he is? I don't know how old he is.
Yeah. No, he's over. I'm pretty sure he's over 90. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, he's he's entitled to look a little scruffy. Yeah.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to. Well, I think he's professor emeritus at the University of Arizona, but I don't think he teaches anymore. I think he just pops up on different YouTube things or does a talk here and there. But
I think he was correct about every statement he made.
Yeah.
I don't think any statement he made was incorrect.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in hearing his iteration of which nations or empires did better. Like the Roman Empire, the German Empire,
anybody else did. Yeah.
The British Empire. I mean, it's a consequence of it, Consequence of conquering. The U.S. conquered the Manifest Destiny, killed all the Indians. Okay, that's what happened. The colonists won, the Indians lost. It's not the first time in history. That sounds funny. Where's that echo coming from?
I don't know. It sounds like it's from you somehow.
Yeah, no, it is from me. Just give me a second. I'll just plug this thing in.
It might be your mic. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that, but let me try just plugging the mic in directly, and maybe it'll be better. Just give me a second.
Right. Yeah. Probably like what happens to Jim. That sometimes happens with Jim. We've noticed.
Wait, there it is. 1 second. Let me pick the mic now. Okay. You know what it is? I'll tell you what it is. In between the program, have to convert the recording. That's what's giving me problems. Okay. So I'm almost here with the mic.
Okay.
1 second. Microphone. No, it's not giving. So everything should be done in comparison to other. Let's say America is an imperialist regime. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, you got it. Okay. The Philippines, Guam, World War I, World War II, whatever. The history of America, Manifest Destiny, Louisiana Purchase, whatever's going on, stealing territory from Mexico. The guy at the top always gets pissed on. That's for sure. It's much better, I think, to be Davis than Hertz. If you're Hertz, you're number one. Everybody's after you. Better off being able. Canada. Nobody ever attacks Canada. So anyhow, I compared the U.S. dynasty imperial regime to Khan, Alexander the Great, Napoleon, Rome, Germany, France, China. Compare the history, and that's what you got to do. You can't compare and say and just look at and then look at some of the beneficial things the U.S. has done, if you consider they have, and how they benefited the rest of the countries in the world, and done good things. That's all. You can't just look at one side of an issue. That's all I'm saying. That's what I would say. He's absolutely correct.
Chomsky's pushing back at the hagiographic view of the U.S. that never considers any of this stuff, just ignores it. Just says we're a great country, we're the
normal.
bright shining light,
The same thing's happening in Japan. You can't get Japan will not take responsibility for the rape of Nanking, and,
right.
And they won't talk about any of the atrocities to the U.S. soldiers or to Guam or to South Korea. They won't put it in the books. Now, I think Germany has it in the books about I don't know if they'll make students go to look at the concentration camps or not.
They do, I think.
Okay, great. I know they still outlaw you can't be a Holocaust denier.
Right, you can't have a swastika. You can't promote Nazism. Yeah, still.
Right, and so that's not that unusual. Public doesn't want to go around and say, I come from a tradition of crooks and robbers and terrible people. I hate my ancestry. I hate who I am. I'm going to commit suicide next Tuesday. Most people don't want to do that.
Okay.
So that's not that unusual. I think he's a good influence in that sense to educate people and say, there's some dark shit here. And it's going on now, too. There's a lot of abuse going on now, and money being wasted and people being killed. And okay, here's one that got covered up this week. Fortunately, Biden retaliation for the 13 people getting blown up or the 200.
Right. Yeah.
It was an oops, sorry. It looks like it might have been a mistake.
Right.
So,
In fact, I think it was somebody who was working for the government. Got blown up.
Too bad. Yeah. And then Obama must have killed 100,000 people with the drone attacks. I mean, civilians. Nobody talks about
all around the world. I don't know about 100,000, but tens of thousands definitely. And we know 90% of them, according to the Pentagon internal documents, were not the targets. So we're probably innocent civilians.
Oh yeah. There's another country to look at in terms of empires, the Ottoman Empire. Look at the history of the Ottoman Empire or Christendom.
Well, I can tell you personally, again, they occupied my ancestors for some time. So,
what about
Greece? Greece was, in fact, the story is with my mother's village in northern Greece. Is called Skalakori, which means like the place high up. The town was rebuilt and put higher up by the residents because the Turks kept burning the one, down in the valley.
Right.
So they built and they moved further up where, they'll be harder to get at them.
That's right.
Yeah.
That
little personal history with the Turks,
And there's terrible history all over the world. If you go to gapminder.org, there's a guy, Steven Pinker, who's an academic.
Right. From Harvard.
The world has never had less conflict, less poverty, longer lifespan, less disease than ever. And then people say, yeah, but what about this, that, and the other thing? Yeah, fine. Numerically, after World War II, there were major wars like the Korean War and the Vietnam War and so forth, and atrocities and so forth. There hasn't been it didn't escalate to World War III, not yet. I hope not. The world has profited from the improvement of technology. The technology goes through a cycle of it's a curiosity, it's interesting, and eventually it becomes something you can't live without. Let's say like hot water, you know. But it goes through a cycle, and the failures are gone. Like like 8-track tapes and waffle irons on the way out, you know. And
but let's let Dennis. I'm sure he's got an opinion
so
on
that's
Chomsky.
I appreciate what he's saying, but it's just half the story.
Dennis, so what's your take on hearing Chomsky here?
I agree with
his
him.
point of view. Yeah.
I mean, I don't have much more to say about it.
I mean, well, here, let me ask you, since he mentions it, do you guys have distinct memories of the Allende coup and what people were saying at the time?
What? Say it again.
In the Allende, the coup against Allende in '73, you know, the first September 11th,
yeah, I know
as he said.
about it.
You guys remember? What do you guys remember about that? Since I wasn't around,
I didn't know
I
any.
was born '74.
Never
so
heard
I really wasn't around yet.
Never heard about
But
it.
Dennis, I'm guessing you
a
probably.
friend of mine who was he was actually Fidel Castro's ambassador to Spain.
Really?
He was part of the Cuban Revolution, and he knew Fidel and Che and those people. But he left for his own personal reasons. He left the revolution. But the thing was, when when the coup took place in Chile, he called me up and had me come over to his place. He was in mourning. He had actually, he wasn't close friends with him, but he knew him through diplomatic through diplomatic channels. He knew, and he was actually talking to me about possibly both of us going to Chile and volunteering for Allende's government.
Oh, really?
Right, and then we had the coup. So, and he told me a lot about
What would you have done for them?
what.
What would you have done for the how were they thinking that you would participate in the government?
I don't understand what you're saying. Say it again.
Well, you said that you were thinking about going there and joining the government, but what kind of job were you thinking about taking? I'm just wondering. Yeah.
Well, we would come down as consultants, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, we were doing. Remember the war on poverty?
Right.
Does that make it? Well, we were part of the war on poverty, and we had we were actually I mean, I had written a proposal for the for what do you call it again, for HUD, HUD.
Right, HUD, yeah.
It was called. It was. Well, do you have time for this?
Sure. No, we got another 10 minutes.
I mean, I'm getting tired myself, but what I can tell you is, I was at Temple University at a place called the Center for Social Policy and Community Development, and we wrote I mostly wrote it. It was a national training program for HUD for tenant management of housing authorities. And this took place in like the early 70s. And I met this fellow there. His name was Luis de la Cuesta. And he was a guy who was part of he was a student leader during the revolution in Havana.
Okay.
And he actually was buying guns for Fidel in the mountains when the revolution took over. He was someplace in the United States negotiating with arms dealers actually. So, but anyway, he and I are both political scientists. So anyway, so we had a lot in common in terms of political science and stuff we read and traditions and everything else. and it was a very revolutionary time. The time between 1967 and 1973. I would call it a revolutionary period. I would say that we now have a similar period, which is a revolutionary period. We, I don't mean that there's going to be a revolution necessarily. What I'm saying is there are revolutionary openings. We can make advances, and but anyway, I met him at the Philadelphia Housing Authority because we were trying out our national housing plan as the Philadelphia Housing Authority. And they had people there that were, at the time, they were hired by the mayor. Uh, they were, I would call them,
mayor.
they were change agents. There were change agents at the Philadelphia Housing Authority,
Philadelphia. Okay.
and he was part of their team. And somehow I met him, and we got along. Anyway, he was mourning Agenda's murder, basically.
Yeah.
And so we talked about those things, and I mean, it was I was for anybody that was left and progressive in those days. It was a major setback, and it was something to mourn. It was terrible, and so that's all I could say about it. It was it's my comment about Afghanistan in 2001, 2 was the Empire Strikes Back, but we could say that was another time. September 11th, 1973 was the Empire striking back again. And but the United here's what I think. I think the United States can keep doing this all over the world, but it can never get out of its crisis because it's a structural crisis. We will not be able to solve, like we got out of the Great Depression through World War II, but we're not going to get out of this. Whatever it is good. And what Istam Massaro says about it in writing, he died in 2017. He says it could be creeping. It just keeps going on. It doesn't have to be catastrophic things that happen. Although the environment is very catastrophic, it is, and getting worse. But the point is, the structural crisis means that you can't somehow solve it. It will just keep going on, and it could be going on very quietly where people don't even notice. And he says that the structural crisis started as early as 1967.
Really? Well,
Other people say early 70s.
Yeah.
I saw it as starting. It was 73, 74 when we had something called stagflation. You know about stagflation?
Right. Yeah. Of course.
Yeah. Well, it was. Uh, I knew something was in crisis when we had stagflation. I mean, whoever heard of having inflation and depression at the same time? But that's what we had. And
Right.
so anyway, but that period was, I mean, I mean, it really was a revolutionary time. I mean, we had the Black Panthers out in the streets and everything else, and so it was a lot of people were sensitive to what was happening in Chile. It was tragic.
Right.
It was tragic for people who knew what was going on.
Right.
And if you want to
I
know
imagine most people thought it was the CIA from the beginning, right?
right, well, it was Kissinger.
As came out.
It was
Yeah.
Kissinger. I mean, if you want to know why people hate Kissinger, that would be one of the reasons.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, I mean Kissinger is hated.
Yeah. Oh no.
least on the web.
He can't travel to a lot of places because there would be a warrant sworn out for his arrest by the International Criminal Court.
Right, exactly.
We go to Europe. He doesn't have that stupid law that says, "Oh, if any American is tried by the International Criminal Court, we have the duty to invade The Hague in order to save him or her," which is completely bonkers. You're going to go to war to protect a war criminal? I mean, yeah. But Ken, do you want to try and or you just want to do the end?
No, I don't want to play anything because I'm like hobbling.
I think we're all talked out. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're talked out. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's good again. I think we're doing pretty good again. We've been, it's been a sprightly conversation.
Don't believe anything I say. I'm just saying it to create conversation.
One thing I want to mention: do we have an audience at all? Are we going to have an audience? Are we podcast? What are we?
Okay, here's where we're at. I'll give it to you, Dennis. These things are being recorded. Okay, if I set up a YouTube channel, I can upload them, and they'll be there forever unless they take it down. And then we can stream live to them also.
Right.
You just have to set up a dedicated YouTube channel for going viral news.
Are we going to do that?
And then from there, we can maybe coerce, or all we have to do is turn it into a podcast that does distribution. A friend of mine is doing that.
Yeah.
She started in doing reviews of South Korean melodramas. They have like
oh right, yeah. It's popular with certain people, yeah.
That's right. So she just talks
K-pop,
about
those K-pop. I mean, you can get them on Hulu and some of the other,
Right. So she does like reviews of the shows and stuff. And she found that a place that does the distribution of podcasts for like $10 a month. They get, so you put your fish in a bin and everybody can pick it up. She's not making any money, but she's getting like 25,000 people downloading from all over the world. So I just have to do the mechanics to set that up. So Jim's idea was, let's do these Zoom things till we get more and more proficient. Fortunately, I'm pretty sure we've conquered the audio part of it. The
video is another issue.
Well, the video, it's a question of horsepower.
Yeah.
And it's okay. I think
maybe getting if you want Michelle to get a good camera. Again, you can do the thing where you have a second camera that's higher quality and.
Well, I've tried that. Now hold it a minute. I've tried that because my son gave me a camera, and the second camera is like super HD, and for people my age and older, that looks much worse.
Oh really?
Yeah. It's just you come in and you see, and for lighting for these events, you just want to be overlit, or wipes out all of the shadows and creases and everything.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter.
You should
we're just talking heads.
Stop recording so we can talk more.
Okay, great.
We want to give away our secrets, or maybe.
Yeah.